Hey, I want to welcome everybody out to the AgriSompo October marketing meeting. It sounds like from early conversation, this is our first dose of some cold temperatures across the country. I know Texas reported some cold temps last night. We got a reasonable freeze here in freeze frost event down here in Southern Illinois. So yeah, it looks like we transitioned straight from summer into winter and avoided fall at all cost. Today, we're joined with Jeff Dorn from Planalytics. Jeff's been a guest on our marketing meeting many times in the past, and I know that he's always got a good perspective on not only the weather here in the U.S., but the global weather. Um, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you here in just a second, but I wanted to talk to everybody about this soybean situation that we're facing right now. We're right in the middle of harvest across the country, and I kind of gauge everybody's temperature in agriculture by the calls that I get coming in from agents and farmers across the country. And Jeff, as you can see, I've got a November soybean chart pulled up here from Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and when we use the term off the charts, it's usually in a good nature. Off the charts is somewhat negative right now. As you see, we're trading all the way down here around 971. And as timing would have it, this coincides with a lot of beans going to market. It also coincides with the November option on the Board of Trade getting ready to expire in a couple weeks. And many farmers did a good job by locking in basis levels at good levels. We are seeing those levels recover pretty quickly where harvest is over. But as we move further north in the country, levels are still under a lot of pressure due to producer selling. And so while we did well on the basis, we're going to have to set futures on those contracts. And this is really challenging because nobody wants to set futures around 971. So hopefully in today's call, we gain some insight into helping us make that decision. Jeff, a lot of what we're experiencing right now has to do with what's going on in South America, and I know you're going to focus on that. We got past the WASDE report in October, and there was hope that in October we might reduce that U.S. bean yield. From an AIP's perspective, we are seeing some claims come in some odd places. I know in our WASDE report last week, we had an agent from up near Rantoul, Illinois, just a little north of there, that was seeing some claims come in due to price and yield. Yields in the low 50s actually trigger a payment on some policies up there. So, and we also had some reports of some Minnesota bean yields, maybe a little disappointing. I know I was talking to an agent in northeastern South Dakota. I was pretty happy with the corn yields, not so happy with the bean yields. However, the October WASDE didn't come through for us. We maintained yields exactly where we were at. We were hoping that might take the edge off that big burdensome carryout that we were talking about. One of the solutions that we've shown or provided over the last couple of weeks is we know producers, they want to sell these beans for cash flow reasons. Operating lines of credit are challenging. Our advice is kind of hedging 101. It is to, turn those beans into cash, buy a call option out there that gets you through the South American growing season. We've chosen March. And we're not so concerned about a 50, 60 cent price rally that we're going to miss. Jeff, we're more concerned with a $2, $3 price rally that can probably only come with sustained problems in South America. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jeff. And again, welcome back. And we're looking forward to your perspective today.
Well, thank you, Brooks. Appreciate it. And it's always great to be here with you guys. So let me share my screen, and got some stuff to present here. So just give me a second to get myself out of the way and bring this up. Okay. So hopefully you can see this. Again, thank you very much, and a great lead in. So actually, it was Sterling Smith who invited me to come speak because, again, all eyes are now on primarily South America, but he also asked me to talk about Australia a little bit. So I want to build the story as I typically do, and for us, the story begins in the global oceans. This is looking at what we call a sea surface temperature anomaly chart or profile, and the blue represents cooler waters. The red and orange represent warmer waters. So again, most of the world's oceans are very warm. Certainly, we've seen that fuel a lot of tropical activity here and causing some issues. But really, it's all about what's going on in the equatorial Pacific. You can see I've highlighted that in the box. Those blue waters represent what looks to be a burgeoning La Nina on the back of what was a short-lived El Nino last year. So again, we are kind of moving in a different direction. So with this burgeoning La Nina, there are some things that we want to call out. And so just focusing on that potential development, what we're showing you here is the forecast of the sea surface temperatures, and it's really a probability there on the left of La Nina in the blue, becoming more probabilistic here in the next couple of months. So while it's not formally announced, the guidance has been for many months now that we're going to get a La Nina, and that really will carry through much of the South American growing season. And so on the right-hand side is actually the models that are forecasting the strength of the La Nina. So again, we came out of a three-year La Nina back in 2021 to 23 that was very strong. We got the El Nino last year. We're moving into the La Nina, but it's not looking all that impressive. So on the right-hand side, what I've done with that arrow is pointing you to the La Nina threshold, which is minus 0.5 Celsius. And most of the models are pretty much focused right around that. But again, everything seems like if we get a La Nina, and it's not 100% guaranteed because the probability has been dropping, it looks to be fairly weak and short-lived. So again, probabilistically, it looks high in the next couple of months. So a lot of our forecasts are going to be focused on the idea of moving to a La Nina here fairly shortly. So let's get right to it in terms of how we're thinking about South America. We're just coming into their season, into their primary soybean season. I've got some factoids here. Again, I mentioned before, we're still in INSO neutral conditions. We are expecting that La Nina to develop 60% chance, although that chance has been coming down, as I mentioned, in the last couple of months. We'll watch that. Chances are we'll still get there, although it will probably be very weak. Okay, so focusing on Brazil, look, coming into the season, it's been very hot and dry, unusually so. I think we've been seeing in the news that it's been very hot. They've had wildfires down there. Not so long ago. I mean, we've had regular temperatures in the mid to upper 90s, very unusually warm. It's also been very dry. Outside of far southern Brazil, that's Rio Grande do Sul and Parana, moisture up until recently has been quite limited. And so there's certainly been a lot of concern coming into the planting season about, planting into a lot of dry conditions. Just looking at Parana here, they do have, they've gotten underway. 85% of their first crop corn is planted. They've got soybeans in. It's still going on, but things have been pretty dry. So there's been some concerns there. Argentina, again, really just getting into their planting season here. They fared relatively better than Brazil in the run-up to planting, averaging in the upper 80s. But it has been a regional story. I mean, if you're in the east, from Corrientes all the way down to Buenos Aires, conditions have been fairly moderate. We've had some rains down there, but if you go to the west, Cordoba, Salta, those areas, certainly it's been a lot drier. So again, they're just getting their season started. So let's talk about the La Nina. Again, this is really going to be our focus, and again, we talk about La Nina as one of those primary influences on the Americas. We talk a lot about the U.S. In the U.S., it tends to be warmer and drier across the south, wetter and cooler across the north. But there's a lot of other factors in North America. In South America, given its proximity to the La Nina event, they tend to be much more impacted directly by the La Nina. So this is looking at the correlation, and the winter. This is October through March. So this is South America summer season, and it suggests that those key areas of Brazil and Argentina tend to be drier. And the last few years when we've had La Nina seasons, they've been hot, they've been dry. Southern Brazil and northern Argentina have been adversely impacted. Again, from a weather perspective, cutting yields. Certainly that is. So that's something we'll continue to watch. Let's build it out a little bit more. So I mentioned it's been very warm, very dry. This is looking at the mean temperature anomaly for South America in September. Those dark red shadings represent upwards of 5 to 8 degrees above normal. And again, those maximum temperatures have been well into the 90s and really focused right over those key growing areas. But look, the big story has been how dry it's been. I mean, those shadings of brown represent very little rainfall that's occurred in those key areas. A little bit better across parts of the far eastern Brazil, but Mato Grosso, that key growing state and adjacent regions are not looking all that great. October's opened up a little bit. I mean, the first week to 10 days, we remained very hot. You can see again that focus of the hottest temperatures right over those key growing areas. But things have started to loosen up in terms of precipitation, really just in the last week or so. So we've started to see more plumes of moisture come in from the east, impacting, bringing some much needed rains to parts of eastern Brazil, but also more so down across southern Brazil and northern Argentina. Take a look at some of these areas that have picked up some moisture of late. So things are starting to improve a little bit just as we're getting planting and planting season going. But look, we've still got issues. This is looking at what we call the root zone soil moisture. This is looking at the top meter of soil and the percentile of the wetness over the last 60 years. So if I had showed you this even 2 weeks ago, much of the country would have been dark red. I mean, that's how dire the situation was as planting season was approaching. But got to tell you, conditions have improved considerably here in the last 7 to 10 days, and we're starting to see that, even suggesting a surplus moisture down across Rio Grande do Sul down there in far southern Brazil. So conditions are starting to improve, but we're still looking at the vestiges of what's been going on up until that point in time. So want to give a shout out to our partners, Terrametrics Agriculture at the University of Kansas, who provide us these weekly greenness images. This is from Brazil. What you're looking at on the left is the change from prior. So again, we're really just getting the season started, so don't expect to see much movement there. But take a look at the change from last year and normal coming into the season here. And again, this is really the result of how much hotter and drier it's been up to this point. So again, those are some pretty considerable deficits. You really have to go to far eastern states from Parana on north to really get greenness looks a lot better than the interior of the country. And then looking at Argentina, again, mentioned before, it's been very dry across parts of the west, and you can see that here. But there have been more frequent rains in parts of the east. I know there's some heavy cotton areas there in northeastern Argentina, and then down into the key growing area, soybean growing state of Buenos Aires. So a little bit better situation for Argentina than Brazil has been. Okay, so that's kind of where we've been. Let's take a look forward. And like I said, things have opened up, and this is pretty much in line with the end of the dry season and the start of season with more precipitation. And we're seeing that here. I mean, the next 2 weeks they're looking fairly moderate for a lot of Brazil, a lot of Argentina, and even more so, starting to see some good moisture across parts of the east, and even extending into places like Mato Grosso do Sul, and even edging into the key soybean growing state of Mato Grosso, and then even down into what has been parched Argentina. So things are really opening up. Things are improving in terms of at least the conditions to get the early crops emerged and moving. 15 to 28 days, the best chance for moisture is still going to be along the eastern areas, the best chance for moisture, although there will be the chance of showers during this period over parts of the interior, but they will be lighter in nature. And then we do provide a longer range outlook. So we've just we've been doing this in the U.S. for several years, but we've now brought this capability to South America, understanding how important it is. So this is looking at November, and if you look at this, it looks fairly warm for a good part of the country. So we're really just edging into the summer season here. Drier across parts of Brazil. Look, typically it ends up pretty dry across those key growing areas of Brazil. This is suggesting at least normal moisture and edging a little bit higher across parts of the east. But I think as we get further into their summer season, and we're starting to see vestiges of that here in December, I expect to see a much drier setup starting in that southern Brazil, northern Argentina region that we're going to have to watch pretty closely. Again, we've really been bit in these La Nina summer seasons in the last couple of years down in those key producing areas. So there's going to be some growing concern there in December. And then in January, even more so. So I think the dryness, frankly, is underdone, just based off of what we've seen historically with the trends. It's going to be warm throughout. I mean, we'll certainly have some cooler periods. I think the warmer than normal temperatures is certainly going to be with us. But I think the wetness is a little bit overdone here. Certainly by January, the high summer, we're going to start to see more unfavorable conditions for the crop. So, it might warrant a check-in, midsummer there to kind of see how things are progressing.
Jeff,
but
that's
yeah.
something I was going to ask you here. I mean, we
Sure.
kind of know the market. The market does okay with good news. It does okay with bad news. It gets
Right.
very volatile with uncertain news, and it seems
Right.
like that uncertainty is kind of on the eve of really important dates. And it seems like we've kind of passed the planting eve, so to speak, here. We got some sufficient rains, I think is the best way to say it. Like you said, as we look into that November, December time period, what's the eve of the critical period there? Is that going to be the last 10 days of November, first 20 days of December in your mind?
It's really hard to say. I mean, so what, when you talk about the critical period, what are we talking about here specifically? I guess I'm trying to understand the question a little bit better. Brooks?
I'm back with you. Sorry, my
Yeah.
internet timed out. Critical time period here for soybeans, July and August in the United States.
Right.
So
Okay. Yes.
that June 15th through July 15th, I'm going to call the eve of that critical time period. When would you equate that to South America?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to compare directly, but yeah, I'd say the high summer, certainly as we get toward the back part of December and into January, that's going to be a key period, and that's when we've tended to see the onset of some significant heat and drought. So that's the period I think we got to watch, is the back half of December into, let's say, the mid to late part of January. I mean, that's going to be the critical time for us to really see whether we've got a significant issue with the crops or not. So that'll certainly be a key time for us to be watching.
As we look at that WASDE report that we just went through in October last week, the carry out in the U.S., of course, directly impacted by the crop that's produced down here. And anything we can get below that 600 million mark is going to be key. Jeff, to kind of put this in perspective, even a 2 to 3% loss on this kind of crop doesn't move the balance sheets in a big way. It helps, okay? It gives us some opportunity. Whenever we talk about this dryness, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Um, how would you qualify a dry event in December right now if we had to? Is this something that is modest, um, be forecasted, or is it something that could take a severe path?
Well, at the end of the day, we're forecasting the scenario. I really have to base a lot of it on history
Right.
and what we've seen with the La Nina. And I would say I lean more toward more significant yield uh, limitations. I mean,
Yeah.
I think these events we've had with the La Ninas here the last couple 3 years have really reduced the yield potential in some of these key growing areas. So there's no reason for me to believe that we can't get in that situation again. Look, we've already seen it's been very hot, very dry. Yes, we're getting some relief now, but once we get into that high summer and we start to build, if we start to build that droughty area there in northern Argentina, southern Brazil, once we start getting that heat, it's hard to get rid of that drought in the
Yeah.
summer season. I mean, precipitation becomes much more scattered in nature anyway.
Yeah.
So even if you do get some relief, it's not going to move the needle in terms of really busting any kind of yield limiting drought. So yeah, I think we have some big concerns coming into the high summer
I know
down
those were impossible questions to answer.
there.
One of the
Yes, yes,
one of
they
the
were.
reasons I did it is before I mentioned, if a farmer has to take their U.S. soybeans to market right now, which a lot of them want to ease the pain at 8% operating lines, they want to get that done. If you're going to buy that protection in the form of a call option, we want to get something out there that's past this December and January time period. So a March option on the board gets you through most of February, which should be sufficient here. Again, a call option is not going to help us in a 30, 40, 50, 60 cent rally. It may help pennies. This type of protection helps us in something that is, a big rally. And if we're going to see that big rally, Jeff's talking about what is going to be the instigator of it right here. It's got to be something that is moderate to severe in South America. And there's a chance of that again, and probably a better than average chance based on what Jeff's telling us historically. So thanks, Jeff, for giving us that time period illustration.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, look, we're going to be watching it pretty closely. We're providing clients, regularly the greenness imagery. We're always staying on top of those conditions. So we can certainly make sure. I mean, Sterling Smith is on our weekly calls that we have, so he's certainly in tune with everything that we've been looking at. And South America really gets our attention now for the next several months. So we'll certainly keep an eye on it. There's only so much we can project at this point, but yeah, I think we have to be watching with some concern here for the high summer for those guys. And look, I'm just a shout out again to our partners at Terrametrics. I mean, they've been providing us the greenness imagery. Just know that we have been doing the soybean yield forecast for both Brazil and Argentina now for several years. So I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that we have this information, and if there's any interest, certainly we'd like to know. We start our soybean yield forecasting for Brazil and Argentina in the first part of December, I want to say, and there are 5 reports that go out through the middle part of February. So again, if there's any interest here, please let me know, and we can certainly talk about getting that set up for you. So just letting you know that's available. I'm ready to quickly move to Australia. We don't typically have as much information for Australia, but we do have some insights that we can share for you. Again, we already talked about La Nina. Look, Australia's had a pretty relatively mild and uneventful winter season. Everything that I'm seeing, the wheat crop looks pretty good. I think we're going to get some pretty good yields there. Summer grain planting is just getting underway, and moisture supplies are looking very good. So it's a completely different situation for Australia. I think the weather has been very favorable, and frankly, what we know about La Nina summers there is they tend to favor more moderate temperatures and above normal rains, particularly in the east, some of those key growing states. But those have also been years when you can get some significant flooding as well. And we've seen some pretty considerable flooding episodes here in recent years. Here a couple of years ago, I know there were some pretty devastating floods in Queensland, all the way down to New South Wales, and there were certainly some agriculture impacts from that. But overall, it's been pretty moderate. Here's the look back at September. Again, mean temperatures have been just pretty marginally warmer than normal. I mean, nothing great. And we've seen plentiful moisture, frankly, for a lot of areas, particularly there in the west, the month. Looking at October, been a little bit warmer for the continent, drier interior, but still plentiful rains. Moisture is really in good shape. So I showed you that root zone soil moisture for South America. The same view here for Australia. Those blues represent actually overly saturated conditions. So again, it's been a very favorable winter for much of the continent there. And then the 2-week forecast is here. So a bit warmer, drier, but again, soil moisture levels are good. Planting seems to be moving along pretty well. So I don't know how big Australia is when you kind of look at the overall market, but it certainly looks like this upcoming summer growing season for them certainly looks pretty favorable coming into it. And again, the La Ninas tend to favor more moderate and favorable conditions from a weather perspective. So it's certainly something we can watch going forward. And that's pretty much all I had in terms of the slides that I had to show. So I'm at the point where I can take any additional questions.
Yeah, use that chat box out there. You've got an expert here, folks, in Jeff. Take advantage of this. If you've got any questions at all, shoot them in that chat box. Jeff, as we transition to Australia there in the last few slides, we kind of transitioned over from soybeans and corn to a lesser extent, but to wheat. As far as any other global spots that wheat is impacted by, whether that's the upper Midwest in the U.S. or Ukraine, Russia. I know it wasn't in the initial presentation, but can you give us any kind of a general idea of what those areas are experiencing right now?
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine and Russia, certainly with the disruptions we've had there, they've had some issues with heat this year. That particular area, and there's been some issues with some of the crops. In terms of the upcoming winter wheat season there, I mean, certainly we still have the geopolitical disruptions. I mean, the thinking is, I mean, I haven't checked, the progress in the planting, but the weather's been more moderate of late. La Nina typically doesn't have as much of a downstream effect on the European continent, so there's other factors that come into play there. So certainly an area that we'll watch. In terms of the U.S., again, it looks to be, if you're in the north, La Ninas tend to bring more moisture and tend to bring a lot of cold as well. So, we certainly watch the wheat in the U.S. through the season. Everything right now seems to be moving along. I just checked the crop progress reporting, and everything seems to be moving along in all of the key growing areas, to include the Northwest. So I don't expect any particular issues there. I think at the end of the day, it's, how severe could the winter temperatures be? In past years, these are years that we've had some pretty cold episodes. We typically don't get too concerned until we get into the spring, and then, the threat of winter kill. But at least for now, all systems go in terms of winter wheat here in the U.S.
We're going to go with the adage that if you plant in the dust, the bins will bust. We're going to hope that one holds true, and that we've got some dry areas, and it does look like a lot of wheat being put in here, at least from what we're hearing in the countryside. When it comes to Ukraine, Russia, again, that eastern part of Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, has been kind of the most affected by the heat and a little bit of the dry temperatures, or the dry conditions, and into Russia. It's not big corn area as you move east there. Most of that corn area in Ukraine is kind of in in a V in the middle of the country, if you can kind of imagine that map. So right now, conditions are good for wheat planting, probably a little bit early to get too excited about, the dryness having a big effect on things long term. Jeff mentioned geopolitical concerns, and that may very well be one of the deciding factors on this wheat market. When you look at big commodity trading houses, across the world, wheat seems to be of the big three, the one that they are most optimistic about having a chance at a rally. Corn kind of being drug along with wheat. When it comes to soybeans, I think we've dodged this planting bullet down in South America, and we're probably going to set back and wait. This market feels pretty secure with the supply it's got. One thing that I am seeing that is a good sign is when we look at basis, especially at river locations, we're seeing basis improve. So when I say basis, we're talking about SIF numbers from down in New Orleans. They're improving drastically from where they were at 2 weeks ago, and barge freight letting up a little bit. So producers are getting a little bit of gasp of air here, not having those big numbers going against them whenever we compare them to the Board of Trade. So some good sign there. But Jeff, I think the bottom line here is if we are marketing soybeans and we've got to have cash, I like that protection that a $10.60, $10.80, $11 March call offers us. Also, when is this next period of uncertainty? Probably on the eve, of that December, January critical timing. Probably Thanksgiving through Christmas are going to be key times. The world's going to be watching this weather down there. So I think the good thing is there will be opportunities. And when we look at the chart that I showed earlier, it's easy for that to be pretty depressing. Markets have not given farmers a lot of opportunity. The one thing that I can tell you is when there are opportunities in this type of market, they're a lot easier to see. They're a lot easier to recognize. When we look at those factors like relative RSI, when we look at stochastics, when we look at spec fund positions, it's easier to discern when to pull the trigger. And while we're starting hopefully at the bottom and we see some opportunities, we do know this. We want to take advantage when we see those stars line up. And that's something that you get with those AgriSompo action indicators that come out Tuesday and Thursday. I'll be watching those. We're a long way from triggers right now, but when they do trigger, it does signal something that is discernible. So I want to keep that in mind. Jeff, any last comments for the crew as we close things up?
No, just again, I just want to thank you very much. We appreciate the partnership that we have with you, and again, we'll be watching the situation. And again, Sterling Smith is a regular contributor here, and so we'll keep abreast. And if there's an opportunity for me to come back, maybe mid-season, if you think there's some additional information I could provide in advance of these triggers you talk about, I'm always happy to support you guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Everybody have a great week and have a safe harvest out there.